Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that over there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey!
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, we're wrapping up our Bette Davis series with Robert Aldrich's Weirdathon, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com. Subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app or join us on YouTube and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel. And if you were ever curious if the murderous Bette Davis ever applied her talents to birds or small animals in addition to humans, then you're in the right place for The Next Reel's Instagram, hashtag ponyprize, hashtag guess the movie challenge.
And with that, let's check in with Games Master Steven Smart, who we currently have trussed up and gagged in the bedroom upstairs, just so he could find out who won this week.
Hey guys, this week's movie was The Cowboys from 1972, directed by Mark Rydell and starring John Wayne, Roscoe Lee Brown and Bruce Dern. Congrats to @Brendo61 who guessed it on Image 2. You're entered once again into the 2016 Pony Prize hat. As always, a new challenge starts on Monday. So thanks guys, and see you later.
And we got a blot spot this time, following up on All About Eve from a great friend of the show, Ben Lott.
This is not the first time I have seen a story about a young ingenue who makes an experienced actress feel threatened, but the plot of All About Eve was crafted so perfectly and the performances were so spot on that I was actually surprised by Eve's turn halfway through the film. From that point on, you expect the film to take a dark turn, but they continued to surprise me. And I'll agree with Andy that the final scene might be one of the greatest finales in film history. Your rank 54, my rank 29. That is awesome.
That is awesome. I'm not saying it might be the greatest finale in film history. I'm not like the oddball. And it's great. I'm just saying you guys are using awfully heady words for how great it may be.
Well, you know, there's a lot of films out there, but there has to be one that has the greatest final scene, right?
I guess that's true.
Well. It's like Highlander, man. Come on.
There could be only one greatest finale in film. Andy, there could also be only one trailer.
So my trailer, Pete, you know, I'm quite excited about this new movie, Jackie, with Natalie Portman. I find all of the history about JFK very fascinating. There are so many interesting stories about him as a president and him, especially his assassination, and then of course the conspiracy theories and all of that sort of stuff. But I really kind of knew nothing about First Lady Jackie Kennedy. And really kind of everything that she went through after the assassination. So this really kind of, I knew she was kind of like a fashion icon and just stuff like that, but I didn't really know much about her. And so I saw this trailer and I'm like, oh, this is going to be a really interesting glimpse into that life. And kind of everything that was going on with her and how she had to portray herself in order to kind of help the nation get through it, and just all of this sort of stuff and how that affects her personally and her children and all that sort of stuff. I don't know. I just found it really fascinating. And so, especially considering that, hey, we're talking about Bette Davis, you know, one of the greatest actresses, I was like, it'd be great to find a trailer that has, you know, a modern great actress in a performance here. And from what I've been hearing about what Natalie Portman does here, and from seeing the trailer, it certainly sounds like she might be fitting the bill as far as that goes. But, you know, Pablo Larraín is directing this. We're actually, we might be talking about him maybe a bit next year. So that kind of excites me. And Noah Oppenheim wrote this script. It's going to be, I don't know. I'm really excited about what they're doing here. Natalie Portman, John Hurt, Peter Sarsgaard, Billy Crudup, Greta Gerwig, John Carroll Lynch is in it, Max Casella. It's got a great cast. And I'm excited about it. What did you think?
I was really taken by it, as I think I am also with Jackie herself. I think she's a fascinating character and or a person, and I don't feel like I know that much about her, but I just, it's one of those sort of media charisma events whenever I see her talking. And so I'm really excited to see how they treat this film. I was really smitten when I saw who was directing it. And then Noah Oppenheim, what I know of Noah Oppenheim is, you know, he comes more from the world of production, production news. He produced Hardball for a long time and Today Show for a long time, 643 episodes. So he's got a couple, 2-3 years there. And so, you know, he's a news guy, documentary guy, but he wrote Allegiant and The Maze Runner. And
right, yeah, I know.
I wasn't excited about either of those movies. Like neither one of them really met what I was looking for. I know I'm not the core audience, target audience for those. So I was disappointed in those films. And so that's the only thing that gives me pause about Jackie.
I do agree with you there. I'm just hoping that the rest of the team is going to do something great with it. And it sounds like they are. I mean, this has been playing at festivals for quite a while now, starting at the Venice Film Festival back in September. And I think it just finished its festival run. It's going to be opening December 2nd. So buzz is out there. I'm looking forward to this one. So we'll see, I guess.
Well, my trailer, Andy, I can't believe we haven't talked about it, but trailer 2 hit this week with Kong Skull Island. This is filmed, directed by Jordan Vogt-Roberts, written by Dan Gilroy, and stars Brie Larson, Tom Hiddleston, Toby Kebbell, Sam Jackson, John Goodman, Corey Hawkins, John C. Riley's beard. It looks like a giant, fantastic, big, monster movie, CG, motion capture, awesome monster movie. And the trailer, Andy, is terrible. It's terrible. It fails everything a trailer is supposed to do, right? And we used to pick trailers, and I think to an extent we still do, but we may have wandered off the path. The trailers that we would pick were the trailers that we wanted to celebrate because they delivered what a trailer was supposed to do. They were supposed to excite you about a film. They were supposed to get you motivated to go see the film, to tease you about the film, to give you something to look forward to, and to be a particular celebration of the art of the trailer in itself, right? Not just a commercial, but there is a certain craft to creating a trailer, and we wanted to have those kinds of things that we're showcasing. This trailer is the worst on all of those points. This movie may be awesome. This may be an explosion of light and color and size and sound and fantasticness, but they gave all of it to us in the trailer. I don't even care about the movie anymore. I know what Kong looks like. I know who all the various, that there are all sorts of other giant monsters on the island. I've seen most of them. The big spider, that's scary. I've seen all the things that come up from the deep. Now, of course, I'm sure you're going to tell me, Pete, I'm sure that they've saved something for the film. And I'm going to say, Andy, you're right. We're going to have this conversation. I'm sure there's something out there, but they've given me so much in the damn trailer that I don't care. I don't care. And it makes me really frustrated at the movie, at the decisions that Jordan Vogt-Roberts and team went through for this stupid trailer to give so much away of the visuals. That it absolutely sucked my excitement right out of seeing the film. There you go. That's it. That's what I had to say.
Mr. Poopy Pants.
I pooped all over it. I did. I was in the theater. We went to see Fantastic Beasts this weekend, saw it on the big screen, and there's Kong giving it all away.
I think you're wrong. I actually really enjoyed the trailer. It's a monster movie. This is going to be, this is a film about, all of the monsters on Skull Island. And it's just like, they're going to show us the monsters because this is just a B monster movie and they're just giving it to us. And I actually kind of enjoyed what they did with the trailer because of that. They weren't afraid to hold back because, hey, we're going to have wall to wall monsters throughout this movie. So just settle in and enjoy the ride. So I had a great time.
And you were a cheap date.
I can be. Yes, I can be.
Well, you can be fully spoiled March 10th, 2017. Actually, you're already fully spoiled. You don't even need to do anything else. You know what it's about. So you can confirm it on March 10th, 2017.
And I will.
Andy, I wonder if you can guess who I am.
His address is heaven above.
I wonder if you can guess who I am.
I'm Baby Jane Hudson.
Who the hell was Baby Jane Hudson?
I've written a letter to Daddy saying I love you.
My sister doesn't ever go out. She's not fit to receive visitors.
Jane, I want to talk to you.
I'm afraid I have bad news. We'll probably have to sell the house.
You aren't ever gonna sell this house. And you aren't ever gonna leave it.
She's sick and she's not getting any better.
You mean Jane?
I think she seems much better lately.
I was cleaning the cage. The bird got out.
You wouldn't be able to do these awful things to me if I weren't still in this chair.
But you are, Blanche. You are in that chair.
Jane, please. Don't do this to me. Jane! Jane, please!
Whatever happened to Baby Jane, Andy? People all over the world are asking themselves what happened to her. Director Robert Aldrich, screenwriter Lucas Heller, adapted from the novel by Henry Farrell. Stars Bette Davis, Joan, Crawford, Victor Buono, from 1962. This is the last film in our series in which Andy attempts to convince Pete that Bette Davis is deserving of her title of screen icon and grand dame of cinema. Andy, watching this film this time, how did it hit you?
I had such a great time watching this film. It's so twisted and dark, and I think my memory of it was that it was a little more campy because I think it has such a camp status. It's kind of got this queer icon status and all of that. And I think that's kind of how I had locked it in my head. But watching it again, I was just like, man, this is just a really frightening movie. It is really dark. It is twisted. And it is really watching these sisters just, going at each other's throats. Well, really one going at the other's throat because she's mentally unstable. There's just the psychological abuse. It was really just a dark, disturbing story. It made for a really tense and intense horror film. I had an absolute great time watching it.
Andy?
Yes?
I agree.
Hey, you have me worried there.
Yeah, no, I told you last week I'd seen this movie before. It's been some time, but I remember really liking it. I had no connection to Aldrich at the time, and so I always had just remembered this as just Hitchcock, and I think it lives up to the standard of a Hitchcock kind of thriller, a cerebral thriller that turns into something even more maniacal. I really love that the movie poster, if you look at the original movie poster, it has a warning on the poster that is something I hadn't seen before. I'd like to read it now, if you don't mind. This is the fine print. Things you should know about this motion picture before buying a ticket. 1. If you are long-standing fans of Miss Davis and Miss Crawford, we warn you this is quite unlike anything they've ever done. 2. You are urged to see it from the beginning. 3. Be prepared for the macabre and the terrifying. 4. We ask you to pledge to keep the shocking climax a secret. 5. When the tension begins to build, try to remember, it's just a movie. I think that is awesome and
pulling
kind.
A little bit from Hitchcock and Psycho's marketing.
Exactly, right? Exactly. And so that's kind of why I've always had this in my in that sort of Hitchcock gestalt. I think that it is fantastic to watch this film, first of all, knowing what happened to both of these actresses' children, and that they both went on to write these stories and tell the stories of being raised by these women. My memory of Joan Crawford is from her being played by Faye Dunaway in Mommy Dearest, and that, Bette Davis's daughter would go on to write My Mother's Keeper. The lesson here is don't let your kids write books. My God. This was the story of these women that and the torment that they put one another through over the years. That really, I couldn't look away. I called this in my mind, I call it a train wreck movie, and I think that is maybe more what train wreck means to me. Like we say train wreck now, it's like, oh, it was a disaster, it was horrible. For me, a train wreck is really something that has so much terror and horror and horrific images that you can't look away, right? It doesn't mean it was bad. It means I can't look away. And that's how I felt in this movie. Even as sort of campy as it may have appeared, some of the cuts that kind of bend from the the more thriller to camp. I couldn't look away even then. I thought it was fantastic. A great example of what these women can do.
Well, and it's a really interesting thing that Aldrich ended up doing by casting Davis and Crawford. I mean, two actresses who really had kind of been not necessarily at each other's throats from the beginning, but they certainly didn't have that many kind words about each other. And it was just kind of this thing. They were just kind of always Hollywood rivals. They had always kind of seemed that way. And to cast the two of them together in this film, it seemed almost as much stunt casting as just a brilliant move to get two great actresses to play these two roles. And I think that there's a certain level of that by letting these two, who really, for all intents and purposes, were kind of arch rivals outside of the screen. Here they got to be inside the screen as arch rivals, and it ended up working so well. But it's such an interesting thing because people were worried that Aldrich was kind of making a mistake by casting these old actresses. This was kind of the end of the studio era had ended, and really, people didn't have long careers, especially actresses, sad to say, that went on so long. Usually they would kind of get old and nobody would hire them anymore and they would kind of disappear. These two kind of proved over and over again that careers didn't have to end. As long as there were interesting roles out there, they could get them and they could draw an audience. And by casting these two older women, we talked about this with Davis in All About Eve. It kind of revitalized her career. With this movie, it did kind of again. 12 years later, the All About Eve stage of her career had kind of ended, and this kind of created this whole new era for her that she kind of rode out until the end. And same thing with Crawford, who went on to be in a whole bunch of kind of these low-end B movies all the way until I think Trog was her last film. And, it's great that this was just kind of another opportunity to show people that somebody's career doesn't have to end just because they're older. Just give them, different things to play. I had so much fun watching these two and just thinking about everything in their lives and how they all connected and how it all came off on screen here.
It is. It's really fun to think about. Although, I'm interested in how the press treated these women because, my understanding was even before this film they hadn't actually exchanged many words with each other. They didn't like each other. They were rivals in terms of being competitors, but they hadn't didn't know each other really, for lack of a better word. And I think their animosity grew from there. So I'm really interested in the effect of the media on their relationship and how, how much of an impact did it have on how well they were able to communicate with one another based on, the meter of what the media was talking about in terms of them. I think this film defines the Psycho Biddy movie, and we've talked about Psycho Biddy movie in passing, not knowing many of them, and yet here we are. This is the film that introduced it to the world. I love that we get to come back to this. And it was Davis herself that said this was truly a break in women's films. That it was a film that centers on these two women characters that don't involve the men, if you don't count, don't involve a romantic relationship, not counting, the relationship with the father briefly, and that these two go for broke performances, were really definitive in changing the perception of certainly a genre.
So I guess this would pass the was it the Bechdel test?
Yeah, I think handily. Right.
Funny.
Easily. Yeah.
So
the script's by Lucas Heller, and it's based. We talked about it was based on the novel, the 1960 novel by Henry Farrell. Did you peek through the novel at all? I have not.
No, I haven't. I haven't either.
I don't have a lot to say about Lucas Heller, but I just want to highlight the way he turns these suspense bits, because I think they work really, really well. Right there were four elements that really stuck out to me. The way they handled the use of the phone, and in particular the use of the phone, the mechanics of the phone, and it may be lost on viewers today. if you're not of a certain age, how phones used to work. And probably if you're interested in this movie, you know how phones used to work. But he really plays the mechanics of the phone and what it means to leave the phone off the hook to other people who are trapped in a house trying to use the phone, ends up being a particularly suspenseful mechanic. The little things like the balled up paper with the "Please save me" note as Blanche throws it out the window, and it lands so perfectly on the driveway, just about ready for the next door neighbor to pick it up, right as Bette Davis's character comes back in the car, and they stand there over it. Cutting perfectly back from these wide medium shots to this really high angle looking down at the two women talking over the ball of paper on the driveway. Very suspenseful mechanic. The first rescue, as the maid, the housekeeper comes back and goes upstairs, as you're not quite sure what's going to happen with her, what's going to happen with that hammer. And we find out what happens with the hammer. All of these elements are great. And of course, I know you're such a fan of the way the meals are handled.
It's fantastic the way that we handle kind of, the reveal of the parakeet, and then the reveal that the next tray is nothing but food, but then building that to the next reveal that it's rats. And it's just the way that works so well in the script, just constantly playing with our minds as Jane is playing with Blanche's mind. It just worked so perfectly in the script.
It really does. And I'm glad we added this to the note. I'm glad you added this to the note. Anytime Jane's out, this race against time, that's another one where they play with repetition, right? He so successfully tricks us that every time Jane leaves, and it's not just once, every time she leaves the house, it's a race against time, and it becomes successively more sort of intimidating and perilous, even though we know the feeling, like we've already been there. It's a familiar feeling, and yet he's able to play us with that feeling time and time again.
Absolutely. Yeah, it works so effectively. I think the script has a lot of that in that, but obviously, Robert Aldrich and his editor built a lot of that in as well. They really put this together like it is a horror thriller. And from Heller's script through the way that Aldrich directed it and his editor cut it, it just all is taut, tense, and perfect.
Heller went on, or Heller had, I should say, did he go on? Yeah, I think he went on after this to do a couple of episodes of Hitchcock Hour, and then Flight of the Phoenix and Dirty Dozen, in addition to about 24 other titles that he penned. But really, this is some great suspense stuff. So Robert Aldrich, direction.
I think he's a solid director. I think this film gets so lost in the two stars as far as what they're doing here and bringing to the table that I think it's easy to kind of lose touch with the director as far as what he's actually doing here. And I know Aldrich was more of a kind of an auteur, liberal, humanistic sort of filmmaker with some of his other films. Interestingly, he worked with Lucas Heller on a number of them, but this one isn't so much. This one really kind of goes back to, I think, more of his noir days and the stuff that he was doing with Kiss Me Deadly and The Big Knife that really kind of had a little bit more of that darker turn. And I think that he very adeptly shows that he knows how to handle this type of story. He does it really well. It's just very successful, and it's really tense. I think he's a director that you don't really hear people talking about him much as a director, but he certainly has directed a ton of stuff that people know. Aside from like this, and you'd already kind of talked about The Dirty Dozen, Flight of the Phoenix, but he did Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte. He did The Longest Yard was kind of a big one later in his life. He's a guy who's done a lot of big stuff, and I think he does a great job here.
Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, also based on the book, right, by the same author, originally titled Whatever Happened to Cousin Charlotte.
And I think there was what was the other one that he did? Whatever Happened to Aunt Alice?
Yes,
which I don't know if it's also from the same author, but. It was all, he kind of became somebody who's doing some of these Psycho Biddy films.
Wondering what happened to all of these family members. Where did they go? Anyway, but what's interesting about Aldrich is that he comes back and is able to do these movies like The Longest Yard with Burt Reynolds, which is a notably different style and tone, and I think it's an adept and sort of versatile filmmaking.
Well, I think I pulled this quote that a critic said, film critic John Patterson, just a few years ago, said, "He was a punchy, caustic, macho, and pessimistic director who depicted corruption and evil unflinchingly and pushed limits on violence throughout his career. His aggressive and pugnacious filmmaking style, often crass and crude, but never less than utterly vital and alive, warrants and will richly reward your immediate attention." I think that says a lot about, what he does as a director and really what he's bringing to the table here. I mean, there's definitely some violence in this film that I think for 1962, it's pretty intense. I mean, it warranted an X certificate in the UK when it was released. So
that's an interesting note that it opens with the UK, and I think it was right around 2004 that the re-release opened as 12A in the UK. Mighty the times they change. Why don't you kick us off with the first shot, last shot?
The first shot, we start with the black screen and 1917 as a super. And then over the black, we hear a girl crying and a man's voice says, "Want to see it again, little girl? It shouldn't frighten you." Then we get to this wacky worm's eye view from inside a Jack-in-the-Box as it pops open. Something I've never seen before when you're in the box looking up as the little clown pops out. Then you cut to this shot of the Jack-in-the-Box and the little girl crying. And then you cut back to the Jack-in-the-Box and now it's crying too.
Wasn't that the same angle in 7? Anyway, last shot, we've got a high overhead of Jane dancing. She's on the beach and she's surrounded by people watching her dance and spin on the beach as 2 officers run over to check on Blanche, who's passed out just next to them. It is, wow, what a strange and wonderful pairing. The most visual tie-in for me is obviously the circles. I think that the scene from the inside the box is a sign, is in the circle from the inside of the Jack-in-the-Box, yes? And then ends with the circle on the beach.
Absolutely, yeah. There's this kind of circles of madness theme that appeared a few times in the film, and definitely with the inside of the Jack-in-the-Box, when you're looking up through the springs as the little clown pops out. And then you've got the big crowd around Jane. And then, of course, there's when Blanche is wheeling around madly in her wheelchair around her bedroom in circles and all of these different circles. I mean, it really is just kind of this madness that we're trapped in here. It's fascinating. First and last shot, I think.
Well, and that many of the deep focus shots that include the phone in the frame, right, are also focused on the round. The central theme of the frame is the round of the handset, of the earpiece. So it's everywhere. These circles. Yeah. I hadn't caught as many of those until we started talking about it. It's fantastic, and the close of. The mania that comes from a Jack-in-the-Box and the mania that we see as evidenced in Jane dancing around the beach, absolutely unaware of what's going on around her at the cost of all of her, or at the price of all of her attention that she's getting. Fueling that mania is, really central to what the film is about. This is another one of those films for me where if you just saw the beginning, the craziness, and you saw that last shot pull up, I think you could get a sense of the heart of the film.
Yeah, I think the tears also at the beginning and just the devastation at the end as Blanche is kind of dying on the beach. That's another interesting tie there. It's just, this madness that leads to heartbreak and devastation.
Casting, we've got Jack Merton did the casting of this film.
Yeah, I don't know how much he had to play as far as with Bette Davis and Joan Crawford, but the rest of the film certainly. I think really it was Aldrich who brought on Joan Crawford to this film. And then the way that it reads is that he actually is talking to her about it, and she says that Bette Davis would be interested, an interesting choice to play Jane, and because she had just recently seen Davis on a show on Broadway, I believe, and so she went backstage and talked to her about it. And sounds like that's kind of how things went down, which is really interesting. That considering the animosity they may have had toward each other, that they ended up working together. But I think before Davis, they'd considered Ingrid Bergman, Susan Hayward, Rita Hayworth, Katharine Hepburn, Jennifer Jones, Ginger Rogers, and even Joan Crawford. I mean, her part they'd apparently considered Tallulah Bankhead, Claudette Colbert, Olivia de Havilland, and Marlene Dietrich. So a lot of interesting choices, but I think that the pair they ended up with really is what kind of helps sell this film.
Well, it works perfectly. And, we did. I think it's absolutely fair to say we don't know just how much animosity they really had before this film, but clearly, and you found some of these tidbits that I did not find, that demonstrates that the animosity was absolutely there at the end of the film.
My understanding, I mean, we'll talk about this with the financials a little bit. I mean, they both ended up, though, having profit participation in the film. And so from what I read, they really, for the most part, behaved on set. They were both good for Aldrich. They all worked well together. But certainly there were little signs. At the time, Joan Crawford was married to the chairman of Pepsi. And I'm not sure if Davis had a Coke machine installed on the set or if she filled the Pepsi machine with Coke. But one or the other, it sounded like she was just, pushing Crawford's buttons, certainly. Davis says of Crawford that she had all these different 3 sizes of bosoms that she would wear. And Davis said, in the famous scene in which she lay on the beach, Joan wore the largest ones. Let's face it, when a woman lies on her back, I don't care how well endowed she is, her bosoms do not stand straight up. And Blanche had supposedly wasted away for 20 years. The scene called for me to fall on top of her. I had the breath almost knocked out of me. It was like falling on 2 footballs.
Oh, Bette Davis pulls no punches.
Oh my, these 2 ladies.
Falling on footballs. The Coke bit slays me. I don't know how much of that other stuff to believe, but the thing that I do believe absolutely categorically is that Bette Davis did her own makeup, and you can see some of that in the behind the scenes video that was produced at the time. It's a terrible behind the scenes by what you might expect by today's standards, but you do see Bette Davis actually putting on her own makeup, and I'm not gonna lie to you, it's funny.
Well, she said, I think what she said about the makeup, she said that she felt Jane never washed her face, that she just added another layer of makeup each day. And I mean, I think that comes through nicely.
Oh, my dear. I think so too. Yeah, it's terrific.
What I think is interesting is, I mean, they have such big personalities, these 2 women, and you see so much of them playing themselves in the parts, almost as if people were kind of expecting a little bit of that, but also, giving us some really interesting characters. And that's what I think is so interesting about this film is there are shades of reality all through it, yet there are, it is very fictional at the same time. And I find that really interesting to look at as we watch these 2 women on screen together.
Yeah, I agree with that. How do you think, just in terms of Bette Davis's performance, how does this stack up for you, coming from the last 3 films that we watched?
Well, since I guess I'm trying to convince you of Bette Davis's greatness, what I love about it is that she, I think she actually even said something to the effect that she never cared how she looked on screen as long as it worked for the part. And I think that for the part of Baby Jane Hudson, what she brings to the table here is so big and over the top and frightening, but so really authentic that I never really feel that she's just playing it big just for playing it big's sake. I mean, I really feel like she's created this character and who really is just mentally unstable. And I mean, she had kind of been destroyed as a child. And I don't know if it was because of the way that her father raised her and treated her, or if she was already kind of that way. It never really tells you, but it doesn't really matter because in the end, she's just this mentally unstable woman and she's just so unhinged. But you get that incredible turn at the end when Blanche gives the big reveal about the fact that she was driving, and her touching little line there. She's like, all this time we could have been friends, and it's haunting. It's just kind of devastating and sad, and it all comes through as so authentic. I mean, I think Bette Davis, looking at all of the different films that we have watched in this particular series, I think that she's given such a different range, but also wholly authentic for the character she's playing.
Yeah, I'm gonna hand that to you in terms of her performance here. As weird as this character is, as uncomfortable as their relationships are, I find her performance here, specifically as an actress, to be absolutely stunningly bold. And I think it's, back to her quote where this was a breakout film for women. This, in particular, her part of this duo was a breakout film for actresses of a certain caliber and a certain age to do this sort of go for broke thing, to do something that paved the way for Meryl Streep to do the crazy stuff she's done, for to take on these roles that before then were much more difficult to find, roles that weren't written that way, but certainly to be portrayed with the sort of grit and psychosis that I think it was hard to find. And that Bette Davis would take on this role and play it as boldly as she did is definitive, and she's got to be celebrated for that. That's powerful stuff.
Absolutely. And, I don't think that we can give Joan Crawford any sort of a short shrift by not mentioning her performance. Hers is just so much more, it's just diminutive because of the character that she's playing. And she certainly is the more passive character. And I think she brings so much of that to the table here in a really powerful way. I mean, she's just broken and psychologically just kind of crushed throughout the film. I really think that, as big and bold as Bette Davis is, I think Joan Crawford is bringing a lot to the table as well.
Victor Buono plays Edwin Flagg, the guy who shows up. That's pretty much what he's left
the accompanist,
to.
Right?
The accompanist, right? He's as you can tell, I'm British. How nice for you.
He's an interesting actor. I guess Peter Lawford was originally cast, but he ended up withdrawing 2 days after being cast because he was actually concerned his character might reflect badly on his brother-in-law, who happened to be JFK. Interesting tie into the trailer earlier. So that's kind of funny, but we ended up with Victor Buono, who, he's a really kind of an interesting little character actor that I don't think I had seen in much other than maybe, some episodes of Batman or something, but, I really enjoy him here.
Well, he did Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Right. Yeah.
He was Fat too, yeah. Man. Yeah. No, I agree. I thought he was fantastic and funny. And even though his part was fairly short, his journey from like sophisticated British accompanist to kind of psycho at the end, as he discovers what's going on and realizes that he's sort of being played by this crazy woman. I thought it was fantastic. He fits right in and is perfect and was able to pull it together even on short notice in a way that I made him really interesting. And what a weird relationship with his mother. Yeah,
right. It's another pair of interesting relationships in this film.
Yeah.
Something that they certainly were exploring.
Yeah, I don't think anybody was a real fan of family in this film. You know, in terms of what this symbolizes, I don't know if it's Heller, characterizing Pharrell's work in this, or Pharrell channeling, using the book as therapy. But somebody's got real problems with family in this film.
Yeah, I think other than the neighbors and Elvira, I think, there's little points of light, I guess. But
you mentioned Elvira. Mady Norman plays Elvira Stitt. We like her. She plays the role of the housekeeper, the kind of hired support personnel. Interesting to see her after last week's film, talking about all about Eve and that sort of central character. The kind of wise character is the hired help. The person who seems to know it all is the person who is hired on and paid to be supportive.
You absolutely could have had Thelma Ritter in this, and it would have worked just fine.
Absolutely would have, right? It absolutely would have. Well, playing an archetype at this point.
Yeah, right.
So, who else is on your list?
Just pointing out that Wesley Addy, he's in it briefly as one of the studio heads, or not a studio head, but one of the producers in the 1935 segment. And he was the butler from Seconds. So we've seen his face before. And of course, B.D. Merrill, who plays the daughter living next door, was Bette Davis's real life adopted daughter. And like you already mentioned, she went on to write a memoir about her own mother.
All the great parties they went to and circuses, birthdays, getting it made. We've talked about the strategy behind putting these women together. What was it like for Aldrich to get this movie going, to get on this?
Surprisingly difficult. Aldrich was kind of an independent filmmaker, but considering that he had these two women, he had a really hard time getting money to get it made. No studio would sign for it. They said plenty of terrible things about these two old actresses that nobody believed really could carry a film anymore.
And wasn't it Crawford? Wasn't Joan Crawford on she was another one who was marked as box office poison?
Back in the late 30s, early 40s.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but very possible. Very possible.
I think that's one of the things in that terrible behind the scenes that they actually pointed out, was that she was also on that list. So these women were, they were shunned from the box office for so long
throughout their careers. Yeah, it's just terrible things to say about people, but they were still having issues getting stuff made, and nobody would fund it. So he ended up just kind of having to produce it independently. And he got the two actresses to sign on really for back-end profit participation. And that's how he was able to get both of them on. Got it made independently. And luckily, the press started getting excited about the casting. New York Times had a headline that said, TNT potential explosion seen in pairing of Bette Davis and Joan Crawford. And the way that it sounds is that because of that, they finally got distribution through Seven Artists, Warner Brothers. And that's really the reason that it ended up getting distributed. But really, I mean, it's only because he could get Davis and Crawford to sign on for profit participation and just take very little money at the start that he could actually get this thing off the ground. That's how things were. It just, nobody believed that this would be a movie that made any money.
Ernest Haller was the man behind the camera on this film, and I have to tell you, it's one of the reasons it was so easy to connect with this film for me, is because it reminded me so much of the thing that I liked so much about The Little Foxes, is just the way they worked the camera, and even though that film was kind of a mixed bag for me, I think for both of us, this film really celebrates just how well you can move a camera to tell the story.
And shooting it in black and white, too. I think that Haller really played everything right as far as the way that he worked the camera to create this just really claustrophobic, dark, tight atmosphere, and did a really good job. I guess originally they were talking about filming in color, but Davis really was against it, saying that it would make a sad story look pretty. And I mean, I completely agree. This is just born to be a black and white film. It just works so well with those kind of noirish hints that Aldrich brought to the table.
We talked about the deep focus and the little foxes. I think they celebrated here too. I wasn't sure. Some of them, they wouldn't. It wouldn't have been any sort of split diopter thing, right? I mean, some of these wide shots, they were just deep focus.
Yeah, right. I didn't see anything that looked split diopter.
Nothing that looked particularly broken like that. But really used it so well. Such wonderful low angles. They also slapped Bette Davis in the car and let her drive around Hollywood.
And it looks so much better than the crappy process shots from All About Eve, which were the worst. Oh, those were so bad. But yeah, Bette Davis, she said in 1987 that she still would smile when she was playing Jane driving down Beverly Boulevard in an old Hudson, and just the expressions on people's faces in other cars when they saw her driving. She said lots of mouths dropped, which I think that's just funny.
Oh yeah.
So, but I think that what they do here is just find a way to really put this world in the right tones and everything. You mentioned Little Foxes. I was thinking mirrors and how effective they were in that film, and how it worked so well in this film too. Just the placement of mirrors and just those shots of Jane looking at herself in the mirror, and I don't know, just a lot of great ways to work the camera here.
Really reminiscent again of All About Eve and the use of mirrors, right? Absolutely terrific use of mirrors. Ernest Haller, in addition, he had shot with Davis and Crawford before. He'd been nominated for an Oscar 7 times in his career. He'd won for a film we've talked about before, Gone with the Wind.
Ah, that little film, yes.
That's another film that it's a good looking film. That one didn't hold up as well.
Not as well.
Of note, he was also behind the camera for episode 2. The last thing he did, it looks like, was episode 2 of Star Trek, the original series, Where No Man Has Gone Before.
That's awesome.
What do you think about that?
I think that's great. I think that actually he came out of semi-retirement to do that. I think that the director had recommended him at the last minute after attempts to locate a cameraman had proved problematic. So that's exciting that he ended up coming on to do that.
Roddenberry asked you to come out of retirement. You come out of retirement. They don't call him Don Roddenberry for nothing.
That's right. The Don.
You want to talk a little bit about, we mentioned Bette Davis did her own makeup. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
One other thing, other than the fact that her daughter, when she saw her in the full Jane makeup, said, "Oh, mother, this time you've gone too far," which I think works in this particular context. But I did think there was one other thing that I dug up that I thought was really interesting, that Bette Davis's wig apparently had been worn by Crawford in a different film, but neither of them had recognized it because apparently it had been regroomed. And so it's something that somebody discovered after the fact. I think that's just such a strange little thing. Another connection between these two women. Yes, I know.
And in the spirit of things that you can find on your Hollywood map to the stars, we should say that you can find the house where this was filmed, where the exteriors of the film was done. It's at 172 South McCadden Place in L.A. You can go there, or you can just go there on Google Maps and see it, because it's there. It's right there, and put it in 3D view, and you don't actually have to bother the nice people. The next door neighbors have a pool. Oh no, they've got a pool too.
They do too.
Yep, they've got a pool too. Yeah, everybody's got a pool.
Everybody has pools. A pool. I know, they're all over the place. It looks like the house next door actually has its own tennis court too.
Boy, it really? Yeah.
And I actually learned that the house next door, that's where Judy Garland was living when she was making The Wizard of Oz.
No kidding.
No kidding.
L.A. Man.
It's a small world after all, Pete.
Surprise around every corner.
Oh, indeed.
Editing credit. So much of the noir thriller editing vibe goes to Michael Luciano, which was just really, really successful editing work for most of the film.
Well, I'm curious what didn't work for you, but for me, I loved it. All the horror tropes that he had, the dramatic shot of the phone off the hook with a musical sting cut in there, just all the horror thriller cutting, just how tight it was and how tense they built all of this stuff. I thought he did a fantastic job with the cutting of the film.
The clips, the old movie clips that were cut into the film when looking at their old work. Jane's were from both of Bette Davis's films, Parachute Jumper and Ex-Lady in 1933, and Blanche's would have been from Crawford's film Sadie McKee in 1934. Have you seen either of those?
I haven't seen any of them. And I found it very interesting that they used those films and were like good with the fact that for Davis's films, these guys were pretty much mocking everything about her performance in the films. And Crawford was like bagging on the director and the way he cut everything. I was like, this is a really interesting meta story about these actresses and almost how they perceive some of their older projects. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Right, and it actually made me go back and think, what do you think the selection process was like? Like, okay, Betty, what would you be willing to have lampooned?
Right,
exactly. Of your past work. I wonder how much thought was put into that. I think that's interesting.
Well, something else with the editing that I thought was interesting, just looking at the past and everything, I really found it very effective how they cut the sequence when basically one of the women crashes into the other of the women. And the way that it's all cut, it's really, you get a sense as you're watching it, oh, they're cutting it this way where we're not seeing any faces because, well, let's see, this takes place in 1935 and Bette Davis and Joan Crawford are much too old and we've already seen them on screen. They can't cast different actresses to play them. So they're just cutting where you could kind of get a sense of who they might be. And it really sets it up interestingly where you really assume that Jane crashes into Blanche. I thought that was just an incredible way to set that whole premise up, yet put a twist on it that the fact is that's not actually what happened. But the reason that we assume that they cut that way and they shot it that way was because that the actresses couldn't play those parts.
I went along with it the whole time.
Yeah, I did too. But I was just like, I went along with it because I'm like, well, they can't show us the actresses. So we just know that, oh, it's Jane crashing into Blanche.
Yeah.
And then I love that we get that reveal later that it made that reveal work so well.
Totally it did. Music by Frank Duvall. I wasn't crazy about this.
I love though that there's this period and, I don't know if anyone's doing it anymore, but how he's just credited as Duvall.
He's more like some sort of a fashion designer.
Right. It's like Adrian designing all the clothes for
Adrian.
the women.
Exactly. Adrian, Duvall, Charday, Cher. Sonny.
I actually liked the music for this film. I love that there's kind of that interesting calliope theme that we get kind of around Jane's lunacy. And then you've got that crazy I Sent a Letter to Daddy song, which is just so weird and disturbing in its own way. But how they end up integrating that into the score, I really liked that. So for me, I called the score a win. I
didn't connect with it. I didn't think it was thriller enough. Yeah, I didn't think they really capitalized enough on the, back to the film, to All About Eve, and the thing I loved so much about the score there is that it absolutely was a part of the storytelling, and this seemed so much apart from the storytelling that I was distracted by it.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Had you done it, we would have words, but you didn't do it. Let's how to do an award season.
This is a fun one to talk about with the awards. It ended up getting 5 Oscar nominations for Best Costume Design, which it won. Black and white costume design, Norma Koch won for that. Best Sound, Joseph D. Kelly, who lost to John Cox for Lawrence of Arabia. Best Cinematography, Black and White, lost to Jean Bourgoin and Walter Waditz for The Longest Day. Best Supporting Actor, Victor Buono, he lost to Ed Begley in Sweet Bird of Youth. And the interesting one that's definitely worth chatting about is Bette Davis was nominated for Best Actress. She ended up losing to Anne Bancroft for The Miracle Worker. And there is a big story here. Bette Davis was nominated, and she had won the Oscar twice. If she won again, it would have been a record for the number of wins for one actress. It had not happened. No one had won 3 before. So it would have been quite the story. But because of the animosity that had been rising between Davis and Crawford, and the fact that Crawford did not get an Oscar nomination, apparently what happened is Crawford supposedly campaigned against Bette Davis winning Best Actress. And she even told Anne Bancroft, actually, I guess she told all of the women who were nominated opposite Davis, that if they weren't able to accept their award, she would be happy to get up on stage for them and accept in their presence, or in their absence, I mean. Lo and behold, Anne Bancroft was on a play on Broadway, and she accepted. She said, "Sure, if I win, you can accept on my behalf." And she ends up winning. And Davis apparently, now this is rumor, but apparently Davis was standing in the wings of the theater waiting to hear the names of the winner. And when it was announced that Bancroft had won, Davis felt an icy hand on her shoulder as Crawford said, "Excuse me, I have an Oscar to accept." Davis went on to say later, in years later, she said, "I was positive I would get it. So was everybody in town. I almost dropped dead when I didn't win. I wanted to be the first actress to win 3 times, but now it's been done, so I may as well give up. And of course, the fact that Miss Crawford got permission to accept for any of the other nominees was hysterical. I was nominated, but she was receiving the acclaim. It would have meant $1 million more to our film if I had won. Joan was thrilled I hadn't."
It's the truth. Yeah, there's this last quote that I found that on this point, which that was a great summary, but I love this image. Bette Davis says, "Joan traveled around the world carrying the Bancroft Oscar with her. When she came back to New York, she threw a lavish party on the stage of Mother Courage, the play Anne Bancroft was in, and presented her with the Oscar." You know, that's class right there.
Oh, I just love it.
This is when actresses really knew how to rub it in each other's faces back then. They really did. They really trucked in that kind of vial.
Oh,
nice
my
work, ladies. Nice work.
Good stuff.
This has been remade.
Yes, interesting. There was a 1991 TV remake starring real-life sisters Vanessa and Lynn Redgrave. I've never seen it. I didn't hear good things, though. You know, in the spirit of the psycho biddy subgenre, of which, there's a whole slew of them that this birthed. Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte, which Aldrich did a few years later with Bette Davis. He actually had cast Joan Crawford as well. They were both going to do it again, but playing the opposite roles, where Davis was going to be the one feeling that Crawford was kind of destroying her. And I guess they were just having such issues on set at this point. I mean, after all this Oscar hullabaloo and everything, I can imagine. But Crawford, she essentially ended up playing sick until they ended up recasting her with Olivia de Havilland and went on with their lives.
How about the box office?
Well, like I said, this is done independently. Whatever happened to Baby Jane was shot in just 21 days, which is amazing. It cost an estimated $1 million to make, which is about $7.8 million in today's dollars. And, I don't know how we picked it, Pete, but this is 4 for 4 of October openings for Betty. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane opened on Halloween, 1962, the same day as George Roy Hill's marriage comedy Period of Adjustment, starring Jane Fonda. Like I said, this was an unexpected hit, recouping its original budget in just 11 days and bumping the longest day from the top of the box office chart for its opening weekend. This ended up grossing just over $4 million domestically and nearly $5 million everywhere else, giving a total gross of $9 million, or just under $72 million in today's dollars. That means it made 9 times its budget and left it at an adjusted profit per finished minute of $479,398. Pretty impressive, especially for the 2 leads getting profits from the back end.
That's think about that for a minute. I mean, $72 million.
Yeah,
that's a nice performance by today's standards.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Well, and especially when the budget this grossed 9 times what the budget was. I mean, that's fantastic. That really is what you want. Yeah.
Well, I think it's time, Andy, for the 4th of our Bette Davis series. I say we rank it. And let's see how it does.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. Sign into your account over there, and this is, you can go to your Bette Davis fan page on Flickchart. I'm sure you'll find it, and let's rank it together right here. What's up first?
All right, first up we have Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, or The Road Warrior, our new Oh Brother block. That's a tough one. I'm going to say The Road Warrior.
Yeah, me too. Wasn't that tough?
I just feel bad. It's been the block for all of these, and it's 3 of the 4 are now in our bottom half because of the Road Warrior block. But we've got talked about a lot of good movies.
This is what Flickchart was meant to do: cause pain.
Yes, exactly. Whatever happened to Baby Jane, or the Adventures of Baron Munchausen?
Whatever happened to Baby Jane?
Yes, indeed, I agree with you there. Whatever happened to Baby Jane, or the Deer Hunter?
Oh, Andy.
That's a big one.
Oh, dear Hunter. I'm right smack on the fence on this one. You're leaning one way. Tell me you're leaning one way.
I'm leaning to Baby Jane. I'm leaning to Baby Jane.
You got it. Take it.
Okay. Whatever happened to Baby Jane, or When Harry Met Sally?
I'm whatever happened to Baby Jane.
I'm When Harry Met Sally.
Heavily?
Yeah, it's such a great film.
I don't disagree.
And it's just what I'm going to watch more. I love that the story of those two. Fantastic film.
Well, I'm also going to... It is also one I'm going to watch more. Honestly, I probably will watch The Deer Hunter more.
Well, I'm still whatever. I'm When Harry Met Sally. I don't know. It's just a perfect example of a brilliant use of storytelling as you watch these two over the course of their lives falling in love. I love it.
And I would argue that Whatever Happened to Baby Jane is the perfect story of watching these two siblings fall into complete disarray over the course of their lives. It is an uncanny parallel to When Harry Met Sally.
That's funny. That is funny.
You can have it.
Okay.
I made my case.
Go to the
Whatever. No.
Whatever happened to Baby Jane, or Driving Miss Daisy? I'm going to go with Baby Jane.
That surprises me a little bit. I'll also
Does
go
it?
with Baby Jane. Yeah, it surprises me, but I'll go with Baby Jane.
All right. Whatever happened to Baby Jane, or Midnight Run? Haven't seen that pop up in quite a while.
Whatever happened to Baby Jane, I think.
Boy, I sure like me some Midnight Run, but weirdly, I think Baby Jane I'm going to pick.
Yeah.
Well, that settles it, Pete. We're at 159 out of 275 on our flick chart.
God,
I think that's a pretty good
Road
spot.
Warrior.
I know. For considering we lost to the Road Warrior, I still think it's a pretty good spot. I'm gonna say it's okay, despite the fact that all of these films I probably would put in the top half, but it is what it is.
So how do you rectify your letterbox ranking, your star ranking at a movie that's at 159 on Flickchart?
This is still a 4-star film for me. I mean, I have a great time watching it. I'm not sure exactly why I drop a star off of it, but
I don't know either. What is the difference between her performance? I mean, her performance in this film is largely more challenging, certainly more breathtakingly strenuous as an actress than her role in All About Eve, and that movie ended up being a 5-star.
I think it's just the story itself. I mean, as much as I enjoy the film, it's just kind of a really dark psychological film, and it's just more difficult to watch. And so I think that ends up in my mind just kind of diminishing it, I guess, a little bit, maybe. I don't know.
All right.
I'm not sure I'm selling myself on it, but when I left, I'm like, I think it's probably a 4-star.
Okay, I think I'm in that 4-star range too. I struggle with it because I really am. I'm so keen on these performances of these women, and I think it's just so strong. And I don't want to be the guy that only likes the happy movies, but I fear that that's kind of where my reputation. that All About Eve really just nails a 5-star, but that's mostly because everybody's dressed up really pretty and looks nice all the time, and this, I'm not that guy. I swear I'm not, but I'm kind of a 4-star here, and I feel like you did able work, Andy, on this series. You really did. I don't know that I'm totally sold on Bette Davis being the icon. I had mixed results with the first 2 films, with The Little Foxes and now Voyager, and great results with these last 2 films. So I feel like, we're sort of, what is that? We're batting 500.
Yeah, I guess so.
Is that what that means in sports ball?
Sure.
And so I'm
ball?
not. I feel like it's none of these, like, you know, when only half of them were really home runs for me. I feel like I'm not completely sold on it. We didn't really talk about how this film has become such an icon for like a queer icon. Is that what you were calling it?
Right.
I don't understand that. I don't understand that, and it shows how far afield from those cultural elements that I am in watching these movies. I don't get it. Like, I've never been exposed to it in that light, so I don't understand where she gets some of the sort of cultural credibility that she gets. And while I think she's a terrifically fine actress, I just don't quite understand the icon.
I don't know. I mean, I guess it's just what I love about Bette Davis is she is one of those performers who puts 110% of herself into every performance. And I think we've seen it in all of these different films here. She's been so different in every film, and she's always delivered a wholly unique character. And I think, regardless of what you think of the films, I think as far as a series goes, I think it's interesting to just see what Bette Davis can do on screen and how she brings it. And I think to that end, I think is a really interesting swath of her career that we explored here. So, I mean, I had seen 3 of the 4. I had never seen Little Foxes, but and I had some issues with that film, but I still enjoyed it. And I think a lot of it is just because I think that she's just such an interesting person to watch.
Yeah, I can see it. I see what you mean there, and I also I just echo how deeply gratified I am that we actually did this series, because I obviously needed more exposure to Bette Davis, and if anything I learned out of this series, I should see more Bette Davis movies. Because maybe we're just chipping away at a wall. Yeah,
there you go.
And I need to break through it. So I'm cautiously optimistic. A weird thing to say about an actress.
What's funny about this particular film in this series is this made me realize what a hole I have in my filmography of all the movies I've seen of Joan Crawford. I feel like, man, there's an actress I need to see more films of, because I don't feel it's fair to have Faye Dunaway's performance of her so locked in my head as who Joan Crawford is. I feel like I need to go watch more of her movies.
Man, that was exactly my thought. And actually why I brought that up earlier, that my impression of Joan Crawford is Faye Dunaway. That is so unfair. That's horrible to do when she was just she was one of the great actresses in the 30s and 40s. We need to see more stuff.
Yeah.
So that's it. So we're locked on 4 stars on this one. Is that what?
Yeah, I think I'm good on 4 stars. I could almost go up to 4.5, but I think I'm at 4.
All right. Well, let's do it. Let's leave it at 4. And let me ask you, Andy, if this is the end of our Bette Davis series, what comes next?
Oh, Pete, it's a big one.
Oh, man.
It is a big one. Yeah, we are going to be tackling the Godfather trilogy, and yeah, it's an interesting time of year for us to pick a series with such long films. But yes, we've got a few beefy ones to tackle, and I'm very much looking forward to going through this trilogy again. I'm excited to explore all 3 of them and really get a sense of how they all work, regardless of what people think of the number 3.
I actually have never watched all 3 of them in any sort of marathon fashion.
Oh, really?
I've always watched them completely independently of one another.
Oh, that's so funny. My wife and I would always before we had kids, like once a year or so, we would watch the whole trilogy. We'd make Italian food, and we would just sit there and watch the whole trilogy. It was great. Those days don't happen anymore.
No, I imagine they do not. I'm very excited to get into this. That's coming next week. So, and we should say this show, as we are speaking, is it's going live right here on American Thanksgiving holiday. So, if you are celebrating Thanksgiving anywhere in the world, you are celebrating Thanksgiving, this American holiday of turkey. We wish you a happy Thanksgiving, and we are super thankful that we're here doing the show, and that you guys are all downloading and listening to it, and you're probably not actually listening on Thanksgiving, because who are we kidding? You're probably eating. But thanks anyway. Whenever you get to it, happy Thanksgiving. There you go. That's it. I gotta go to bed.
Why? Because you're ugly? No, Pete, you weren't ugly. I made you that way.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
I've got one from 2003. There aren't, we should say, there aren't a lot of 1 stars.
People love it.
So I'm going for
85% 5 stars.
85%. Yeah, people. I think that's fair to say people love it. Although many of those same people don't know if they're talking about Vanessa Redgrave.
That's true.
Okay. Tom Servo writes in from July 31st, 2003. After watching the DVD of this film, I think this was trying to be scary, but it wasn't at all. I found that this movie is best viewed as a dark comedy. The film opens years after a calamitous car accident leaves Blanche in a wheelchair with no one to care for her except the increasingly insane and sadistic Jane and their servant, Norman. Trying to punish Blanche for her years of success, Jane tortures the housebound woman, slowly trying to starve her to death, all while attempting to recapture the fame of her youth. This dark drama also stars Victor Buono as the hefty pianist who answers Jane's ad for an accompanist, hoping to milk some money off the demented old woman. I think it was trying to capitalize on the success of Psycho. Oh well. Get some bud together and enjoy this kooky comedy.
Oh, that's awesome.
At least I feel like I better understand why he thought how the servant was Norman. What?
Oh, so funny. Oh. Well, I've got a 1 star by T-Bake, speaking of buds, who said, "Ew, I think I want to vomit. This movie might possibly be the worst ever film on the face of this world. I would advise everyone to save their money to buy something that you won't want to kill yourself over. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane is about 2 crazed sisters, one of whom is crippled, Blanche. Her sister Jane still thinks she's a beautiful child actor that wants all of the attention. When Jane's sister gets all of the attention and tries to kill her, you see she just gets more and more crazy. As the movie progresses, you get more and more annoyed. One cannot even sleep during this movie just because of how irritated you get." It's good that you're trying to take a nap here. Finally, at the end of the movie, we find Jane and Blanche near death row on a beach. Jane wants some ice cream, so she gets it and leaves her sister to die, starving and thirsty on the beach. Do yourself a favor. Listen to me when I say this is the worst movie ever.
This is the worst movie, and it should apologize. Oh, thanks, Amazon. It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, I know, you're telling me. Producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
In Season 6, our Disease Films series had adaptations like The Omega Man, based on I Am Legend, The Andromeda Strain, Children of Men, and Blindness.
I Am Legend is so much better than The Omega Man.
What about the Will Smith version?
Don't get me started.
For our This Is Real Life Jack series, we talked Black Hawk Down and Seabiscuit, some great true stories based on fantastic books.
And we had more listeners' choices like The Fly, The Emigrants, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
You just did a series on The Fly on the Sitting in the Dark podcast. Did you read the original material?
Wasn't watching every Fly movie enough?
Our Big Bette Davis series featured adaptations like The Little Foxes, Now Voyager, All About Eve, and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Are you calling Bette Davis big?
Only in personality and force.
She is a force to be reckoned with.
We talked about the entire The Godfather trilogy, of course. Iconic page to screen, even if it is just the one Mario Puzo book. I wonder if Coppola will ever make The Sicilian.
We also had some Zhang Yimou adaptations with Judo and Raise the Red Lantern. Absolutely gorgeous movies.
And don't forget the Hughes Brothers series with From Hell, based on the graphic novel. Brilliant material.
Kelly Reichardt gave us Wendy and Lucy and Certain Women, adapted from short stories.
Plus more Hayao Miyazaki as we tackled Howl's Moving Castle.
Find all these books and more at thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports the show.
Get the full list of adapted films that we've covered at thenextreel.com/originals and start your next read today.